So now let's talk about the athletic population, bouncing back there. What are you seeing besides that activation and the warm up? What are you seeing being utilized with the strobes in the athletic population? What are some of the big benefits there?
That's a good one. No, so there's the normal kind of hand-eye tracking, catching type of movement type stuff, kicking, foot-eye coordination as well, right? Or eye-foot coordination. And so a lot of soccer, environments, a lot of football, baseball, hitting. So target understanding and recognition, and then being able to react to it is a big one. In the sport world, we also start seeing a lot of stuff around balance. So they're mixing it into their functional work. We also, so that's anything that's like plyometrics, movement, balance work of any kind, mixing it into some of their more complex moves and functional movements. And then we also start looking at and seeing some trainers who are really getting after it and really pushing limits and letting us know what the results are, right? Because we, like, where are you going with this? But they're putting people on the strobes for like 45 minutes to an hour during full heavy workouts, which is really interesting. And their experience and what they're getting out of it is this whole idea of cognitive loading while you're under duress, right? So they're already physically being pushed, and now they're putting the strobes on, which is forcing more attention, more focus, which is now creating a heavier load on the mind while they're in the middle of these environments, right? So heavy plyometrics, heavy movements, some elite athletes are doing this type of trampoline work. And again, these are trainers that are working really closely with their athletes and really, really paying attention to what's happening and what's going on. But that cognitive load piece is really interesting, because what they're seeing, or what we're hearing from them, is that after these athletes have been doing it for a while and they feel much more fatigued after a workout than they would have normally. But after doing that for a while, and then they go back to doing that workout after a period of rest, right? And not wearing the strobes during the entire thing, they feel like it's much, much easier than it used to be. So there's this kind of point where they start combining these like load areas where it starts feeling easier. They're thinking of it easier because now they've gotten used to that kind of load environment. So some really good things, interesting stuff happening there, which could use a lot more investigation. But the idea is that it's this cognitive load along with your normal skill development. Skill development, we've seen it used. There was a research paper that came out with surgical students. Mm-hmm. So fine motor skills. They were looking at sutures and knot tying. The knot tying didn't have any significant change. That's one of those things that surgeons, I believe, tend to want to do with their eyes closed anyways. But the actual sutures, they learned faster and got better in a much more significant way, faster than the other ones on the control group on the other students. So the idea is, like, even in fine motor skills, wearing them while they were doing that had a correlation to some better development, right? So it's really interesting. If you look at the athlete, they can mix this into a lot of different areas. Mm-hmm. Passing and catching, right? Kicking, for example, you can use it as part of what you're doing when you're kicking. Quarterback, throwing, recognizing patterns of people out there and understanding how to pick up details faster, forcing your system to do that. Runners, using it as part of their form development. So they're wearing them while they're doing their normal form movements where they're doing lots of balance and work. In yoga, we've seen that there's one individual's been training with these. She's a researcher and looks at doing a lot of yoga work, and she's been using them, and she feels like she gets the same mental benefits. So the energy, the kind of the feeling of what she benefits from yoga on attention and energy, and kind of that feeling of being worked out afterwards. She feels she gets the same benefit from doing a half hour with strobes on as she would get normally doing an hour or more without strobes. So she's seeing this idea that wearing the strobes is actually giving you that benefit for that attention and energy, that in a much faster way, so she can do, like, say, instead of a 20-minute flow to kind of get her energy back during the day while she's doing heavy concentration work, she goes out and does 8 minutes with the strobes on and feels the same way.
That's very, very interesting. And I will honestly say, from my experiences, nothing can replicate the strobes or the adaptation that you get, because again, you're throwing on that extra dimension of load cognitively. So when you have to do something physically and you're combining the two, I don't think there's anything that can replicate this. And it's such a like I said, it's such a convenient tool because you can take it around anywhere if you're doing yoga or whatever the task is. Now, on that note, I wanted to touch on a little bit because you brought up an interesting concept there with fine motor skills. So have the strobes been utilized by musicians or, anyone that has that fine motor skills, and has that actually accelerated their practice or their learning?
Yep. Yeah, I think we have a video actually of a musician that's talking about what it did for him, learning how to play guitar or working on guitar a little bit differently and more. And so yeah, we've had musicians using them. Again, anything that's kind of involving your vision as a key aspect of what you're doing, it's going to provide some benefit, right? And especially if you're using that vision initially to maybe build, a motor skill to begin with. So it should, theoretically, it should have some benefit for you, because again, you're forcing your system to work harder, adapt, and maybe use other senses, right? And that's part of what's going on, is by putting this load on and doing it in small slices, you're forcing your system to use other aspects of your senses so your touch starts hopefully playing a bigger part in your processing of what's going on, or your balance, your vision, your skin, your hearing, anything else starts kind of kicking in to help your brain figure out what's happening during these blank periods. And so that's again, theoretically, that's the general idea about what's going on. And obviously, the more research we get on figuring these things out from people, the better.